Oh, yeah, I'll open in prayer, and then we'll take a few minutes to just sit in it. Sit in the whatever rises up for you. And Amy and her fabulous karaoke machine will bring us back. And a deep breath. The message I got this morning from Spirit was center all the time. This is my center for spiritual living. When I'm in conversation with others, I seek my center for spiritual living, knowing that that center is Spirit, the deep well, the deep, powerful, strong love. All of it is Spirit, and I get out of the way and I center in to that well. And from that well, I can be love, hope, I can be power and grace. I'm always those things, but in that deep well, I can be all of it because it's where it comes from, that deep well of Spirit, where my doubts and my fears and my not sures get out of the way. And I am that essence of Spirit. In these days when things are so fraught, find center is what I hear. From that heart of my own center, I can know compassion and curiosity. I can release and do release my story about why and open to a new story about what is. And what is love and compassion and grace and good. Right around the corner. Oh, there it is. Because it's a little tiny corner. It's always here. When I look for it, it's here. So I seek center, and in center, I find it. And I know I'm not the only one. In fact, I know I am of the only one. We are each of the only one. And that is center. Center point, where the deep well overflows into our lives. I say yes to this. I say yes to the message today. I say yes to the music. I say yes to the January 1, 2025. I say yes to all the oopses, because none of it's by accident. It's all Spirit all the time. So I say yes and welcome it in, knowing we are on our way, and it is good, and so it is.
We're going through some tough times right now, yes? Have you noticed? But the world has gone through tough times a lot before, yes? I'm thinking of Charles Dickens, who I think it was a good 175 years ago, wrote, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." You know, and all sorts of people have expressed that the world is going to come to an end. There have been bubonic plagues that have wiped out a quarter of Earth population in the Middle Ages. All sorts of stuff. We've had stuff. I feel really loud. I'm not sure if I'm loud in the room. You're good? Okay, it's just me. All right. My ears are highly tuned. Linda's saying I'm loud. Okay, so maybe we bring down a little bit. But that's what we're here for, is to speak life. Speak life loudly, yes. Well, that's next week's talk. I came here to live out loud. So we're going to start today. Yes. So this whole month we've been looking at the theme of the lightness of being incredible. The lightness of being incredible. Who's incredible in here? Everyone. Yes. And today we're going to ask the question, who am I to play small? And that comes, as many of you know, from a fabulous quote by Marianne Williamson that says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? That was the word I drew today, was fabulous. Actually, who are we not to be? You are a child of God. You're a child of the infinite presence that has created all of the universe. Your playing small does not serve the world. I'll say it again. Your playing small, my playing small, our playing small doesn't serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. So I'm going to invite us to play full out. See, we all know this, yes? Most of us have heard this quote before. We've heard this invitation to play full out. But why do we still play small? Oftentimes we're like the elephant that when it was young was chained to a stump or a log, and it was at that time too small to break the chain. And later on it's so conditioned to being chained that even though it could free itself easily, it doesn't, because its past failures in attempting to break the chain have conditioned it to believe the chain is impossible to break. Take a breath. The correlation to our beliefs formed in childhood is obvious. We also have these things where we believe in childhood that we couldn't do what we wanted to do, and we're still running around conditioned to believe that. Even though today we are powerful beings, we were then too, by the way, but we know it more so, to break the chains. So many of us were taught to play small, even more than we were taught that we were small and insignificant, and that our true nature was an annoyance to adults and older siblings around us. I'm getting to live this because I've got my 9-year-old grandson with me, and I have to be careful to not let my annoyance or my home is normally quite peaceful. I live by myself. Everything is my own way. And suddenly there's this little being that has a whole different agenda and way of life, And so it's a wonderful dance to play with that. So we've been conditioned oftentimes to play small. We've learned to avoid pain by being not seen and not heard. And now, even though we are large, fully grown adults, that's not a comment on anybody's weight, that's just, we're larger, we must still obey the rules of our childhood and whoever appears to be our new parents, such as spouses, bosses, corporations, politicians, police, etc. Take a breath. Those who appear to be in charge. Eventually, as adults, if we don't break this cycle, we move into some variation of the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn process, which looks like rebellion against, that's the fight, or running away from anything or anyone that reminds us of our past, that's the flight, or just simply staying chained to our old conditioning without question, that's the freezing, and hoping it will just go away, or fawning, which is trying to please to avoid conflict, which is often seen in people who come from abusive families. Take a breath. All of these are ways to keep us still caught in the conditioning rather than living in and from our authenticity, which is what we're being called to live from. One of the core kinds of conditionings that we receive includes the idea that we are not sacred. That we are not sacred. That there is a God, or there's a spiritual beings or spiritual realm, and they're separate from us, and they're far more wonderful, and they're to be worshipped and feared and adored and all that stuff. Any of you know what I'm talking about? Yes? Okay. And then there are we, inferior, inadequate, miserable sinners of human beings, living in this corrupt human material world. Breathe. Daring to sinfully want things on the human plane, like happiness, love, prosperity, shelter, decent food, etc. I was working with a minister that I'm using as a mentor, and we were talking about the fact that so many ministers have this unconscious vow of poverty and chastity, especially those of us who grew up Catholic, where all the priests took the vow of poverty and chastity. And so we get to break through. You know, I was joking with her. I said, I'm really good at building prosperous communities, but my own prosperity sometimes is not, what I would like it to be. And so breaking through those old patterns, those old belief systems, to recognize that we are sacred. And so we get conditioned to do that, to feel not sacred, instead of spending every moment of our miserable, sinful lives worshiping and pleasing our version of a rather narcissistic and abusive God. Yes? You know which one I'm talking about? Which ones I'm talking about? Are we on? Okay. Thank you. And a God who is simultaneously merciful and loving and wrathful and avenging, and who will cause you to sneeze for all eternity. One more. Having a sneezer. And will punish you for all eternity if you don't follow his confusing rules, and then encourage you to run around and try to convince others to believe in this same God and in this same story. Want to join me in that? Yeah. No. None of which honors the sacred beings that we actually are. Nudge your neighbor and say, you are a sacred being. You are a sacred being. So with all that conditioning, with all that past, with all that, I'm reading a book from an author who's ranting against AI and all that, and saying it separates us from our divinity. And I'm sitting here going, the Catholic Church and the Council of Nice back in about the late 4th century did far more to separate us from our awareness of our divinity than anything that's happening today. So take a breath and recognize that you are divine just as you are, exactly this second as you are. With all that conditioning, it's no wonder that we play small. For much of our lives in humanity's history and current stories, it's dangerous to let our light shine. Yes? People got burned at the stake. People got ostracized and kicked out. They had to run into exile to save their lives. And even today, it's not the most popular thing to let your light shine fully. And even though as New Thought folks, we might say we don't believe in that God, the cellular and subconscious memories of themselves can be powerful chains which can only be broken when we step into our full power elephant self. You want to be an elephant of light and love and wholeness? Yes? Yes. Feel that in your body. Because it's when our knowing, not just our knowing about, but our knowing and our embodying the knowledge of our sacredness, of our true light, of the authentic self that we are, recognizing that we are the infinite nature in form, expressing, individualized as you. I like to remind people every once in a while that the infinite mind, the infinite presence, the infiniteness is taking the time, the thought, and the energy to be you, me. If you weren't necessary, you wouldn't be here. And we're living in a world that is the infinite nature in form, and that we can finally free ourselves from these ancient chains of conditioning and start to live as full, free, empowered, spiritual, sacred humans, which is what we really are. Nudge your neighbor and say, you're a sacred human. We're here to shine. How does that feel? We are here to shine. Breathe. To shine and share our incredibleness, free of either following the old conditioning or rebelling and fighting against it, caught up in fighting against it, which simply gives power to the conditioning, because if I'm rebelling against something, it's still in charge of what I'm doing. If I'm fleeing from it, it's still in charge of what I'm doing. What we need to do is listen to and discover our sacred self that lives on another and completely different dance floor than this human and conditioned dance we've been doing. And this is why I've been talking about and encouraging visioning for this whole month, taking the time to go within and listen to an authentic self, not just react to that out there. And that practice of visioning is a means of stepping off the old dance floor and discover a new one, a completely new one, and party there, play there. If we truly engage with visioning and listening, it takes us out beyond our ideas of right and wrong to that field that Rumi speaks of, where he says that when the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make sense. That's the dance floor, that's the field that we're to play in. Our ego self engages in ways of identification, which turn into ways of separation from the other. Hi, I'm me and you're you. From which the other can even include aspects of ourselves that seem unacceptable. We oftentimes have parts of ourselves that we don't like, and so we other that part of ourselves and disapprove of that self. Yes? Look at those love handles. Look at those thighs. Look at that, I'm dumb, whatever it is that we other and disapprove of. The ego is constantly trying to manage and project our idea of who we should be. Our ego, in a way, is an image management system to keep us identified as who it thinks we should be, which is usually based on what? Our old conditioning? Yeah, think. And so we should appear as the kind of person that it thinks we should be to get along in the world. I was just talking with a friend of mine who said, well, I have this image. I just realized, because she's working with some ego stuff with a teacher, and she says, I just realized that I have an image that I should be a good person. But I just overreached in trying to be a good person with somebody in my life by trying to be too helpful and got pushed back by quite a bit. And so it was like this, I've got to be a good person everywhere, all the time, to everybody, in every way. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a sacred person, but what is good is our idea of what is good from our conditioning. Yes? It's only when we bypass the ego's image and listen more deeply, which usually takes time and consistent practice. I hate to tell you this. Time and consistent practice. What does it take? Okay. It's that we find that our sacred self that exists independent of the ego's image management system. We have a sacred self that exists independent of that, right? And then from that sacred self, from that field out beyond, we can shine the light that we came here to do, the light of our true incredibleness. And we can play fully out of the closet, neither hiding, playing small, nor destroying the closet in a fit of anger, because that doesn't help either. It may feel good for a moment for the ego, but ultimately, as the law shows us, it just creates an equal and opposite reaction. It comes back to us. So one of the characteristics of the authentic self is that it operates in an as flow. There's an ease and a grace to its expression. Ease and grace. What I find is when I'm in that flow, there's a win-win-win-win-win happening. There's a win that's bigger than I could ever imagine. And I'm looking at Kathy here, and Kathy played with that process when we designed the interior of this building. Kathy had her idea, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, but sort of a conditioned idea of what this should look like based on her training. And she has great training as an interior designer. But she decided to step away from that and open up to visioning and a group of people that came up with a completely different and yet also beautiful idea. And not only was the result good, the process was deep and wonderful. Yes? Yeah. And so I thank you for opening to that. So this is, and it's a win-win-win-win-win all around. So this is the feel of our authenticity. And feeling resistance or being emotionally triggered is a signal that our image management system is trying to run the show. Michael Beckwith has a wonderful saying that a bad day for the ego is a good day for the soul. And so if you notice that you're getting triggered, it means your soul is trying to come forward and express itself, and your ego's kind of been standing in its way. And even that is not something to shame ourselves about. That's just more of the image management system telling us that we should be, quote, perfect. Whose idea of perfect? Its idea of perfect, our conditioned idea of perfect. You're already perfect. Denny is perfect even when he puts up January 1st slides. He's still perfect. And the whole thing works out perfect. Instead, it can simply be an invitation to pay attention and to listen to our authentic self and let it out to play. Are you willing to let your authentic self out to play? So I got 3 practices for you this week. The first one is to take the time to ask your authentic self to help you feel and embody its nature more. Feel and embody. The second one is notice when something or someone triggers you and ask, what self-image is my ego self trying to maintain here? And am I willing to let go and let my authentic self emerge instead? Take a breath. And then the third one is forgive. Forgive yourself and everyone else because we're all working from ancient conditioning. All the conditioning. We're all working from ancient conditioning. God damn it, why don't you listen to me? That's my ancient conditioning right there. That's my ancient parent coming through. Yeah. So we're all working from ancient conditioning, so be forgiving of yourself and others. Even the stuff we see happening in the world is ancient conditioning still playing out. It's tribalism. My tribe's better than your tribe, and I got to throw rocks at your tribe. My rocks are bigger, the rocks are bigger these days. But it's still the same thing. It's still the same consciousness. And so exchange condemnation for curiosity and compassion. What a thing. I want to give an example of that. And what I want to say is I don't know who this story is about. I was not told. But I know that recently, it was brought to my attention that Crow wore a T-shirt that said "Decay" on it for I believe it was the anniversary celebration. And there was a concern brought forward by somebody about that. And I wanted to talk about decay because Crow told me that he deliberately wore that shirt to not offend anybody because it stands for an arts organization in this town. And that arts organization, it's an acronym for Diverse Events and Creative Arts Yard, which highlights our commitment to inclusivity, creativity, and the value of close-knit collaboration. Do we like those values? Yes. Okay. And he says at Decay, our mission is to provide a welcoming space where artists, performers, and the community can connect. By the way, this is a physical space down on 4th and Thurston and Washington, thank you. Where all those folks can connect. We believe in the transformative power of creativity to inspire change, foster belonging, and build lasting community bonds. And their goals are to support local artists, engage the community, promote inclusivity, encourage creative exploration, and sustainability. And I love how they said sustainability because they said it's a triple bottom line business. In other words, most businesses have a bottom line that's what? Financial, money, yes. So they said it's a triple bottom line business. We prioritize social, environmental, and economic sustainability in all our operations. And so a lesson from this is, rather than looking at something and saying, oh, I don't like that, practicing curiosity. What is that about? What does that mean? So if we let our authentic light shine, people might be upset. They might not understand when you're letting your authentic light shine. Let it shine anyway. I'm going to close with a quote, which is the other half of the Marianne Williamson quote. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. As we shine, we give everybody else permission to shine. They pick up on it, they vibrate with it. So lift your vibration to a shining vibration. We have an affirmation. Say this with me. I let the big light of my incredibleness shine ever more fully. And now feeling it and embodying it, I let the big light of my incredibleness shine ever more fully, and so I do.